Thanks very much, everybody, for taking a little bit of time out of your day to join me today. This is our second meeting, number 2 of 6. And so the first slide that I have today may seem a little bit unusual, rhetoric and negotiation. This came up last time we met. As I mentioned, if this was something top down that was from the district and the district said what you're had some top-down decisions relative to gradebook, this might be a lot easier, but in many ways it's not. In fact, it's come up before, like how much power do we have as principals to make changes to teachers' gradebooks or to implement different things? And I've called the legal department to talk to them about this. And it seems like, if you've decided as a whole school on some policy and another, one person decides not to go along with that, then you may have some ground to stand on with issuing discipline around that. Not the way you necessarily want to go, but either way, that's still much more difficult than if the central office would just decide some of these things. But because they don't, it does take longer to make these changes in our school. And so when you're thinking about how to work with teachers, think about the rhetoric over there on the left. This goes back to Aristotle. Using persuasion to get people on board with stuff is what we have to do. So thinking about, pathos, ethos, logos, the arguments that we can make, appealing to emotion, appealing to numbers and data and reason, appealing to all of those different sides of people's intellect and emotions is going to help you. When we're talking about negotiating, we always want to start off with people's interests, which is one of the reasons we start off with pillars. Only after that do we look at rights and finally power. So rights are things like, well, this is what the contract says, so this is what we need to do. And power, finally, well, I'm your boss. This is what needs to happen. Sometimes people kind of get those things in reverse order. Maybe you've experienced a boss who has those in reverse order. It doesn't really build loyalty. It doesn't really build investment over the long term. So again, as we're thinking about these things, I keep reiterating, it's very much a bottom-up process. It's very much a school process. It does take time. It does take, getting teacher buy-in and investment in it. So just be prepared for that. So the first thing I wanted to do today was kind of review what we had discussed during the last meeting. It looks like we got about 8 people to submit their homework assignment. So thank you very much, all of those who did that. And I was hoping that those folks could be, I see Adrian. Thank you, Adrian. I made you a bit of a breakout leader here, nothing too formal, just because you have done this homework assignment and have some experience with it. You can maybe engage others in a conversation. I'm trying to see, was there anybody else who completed the homework assignment online with us now? Oh, Erica, awesome. Thank you very much. I saw it this morning. Thank you so much. So since we're so much fewer than I thought we were going to have today, maybe Amir, maybe it's just having 2 breakout rooms and one with Erica as the kind of the leader. No pressure, Erica. It's pretty informal. Just kind of leading a discussion about how did you go about making your grading committee? Who's on it? Is it your ILT or is it another committee? Was that difficult? Did you run into any problems? Did you assign roles? Did you set meeting dates? Just going through a little bit about what that process looked like. If you also were able to create pillars with your team using the activities that I presented during the last meeting, please also use this time to talk with others about how that went and get feedback and maybe some strategies if you ran into challenges. So we'll take about 10 minutes to allow you time for that. After establishing an ILT and after establishing some pillars for your school, I think the most important next step that you can take, and again, these are all steps that I feel need to come prior to doing some of the things that Feldman talks about in his book or other grading practices that you may have heard of. These are kind of like baseline basics that we don't have set up in our system that some other more centralized districts may have already set up. So what I want to talk about next is averaging mode. So after you get your committee, next, agree to some pillars, some overarching pillars that will help guide your decisions about what grading practices you should implement or change. Next after that is coming to consensus as a school on what your averaging mode will be. I've heard from some networks that the networks have sort of forced an averaging mode onto, see Adrian nodding over there, because I didn't know they were doing that, or didn't know they could do that, but be it as it may, if you're not doing that, it is something that you ought to do as an entire school. And so I have this little activity here that you can also do with your staff that I want to take you through, that I hope highlights why this is so important. So, see my screen? Guys, I would like everybody to take, it's 12:20 right now. Let's go to 12:25. If you've got calculators, use calculators. If you've got Excel open, use Excel. If you prefer paper and pencil, however you do it, would you please tell me what this student's final grade would be for the quarter at your school? I've been doing this little fun activity for a while. If you've never seen it before, hopefully you'll get the point of it shortly. So I would like each of you individually to calculate what this child's grade would be at your school. Kind of interesting, right? I've been doing this little activity for years. I mean, literally probably over 5, 6, 7 years I've been doing this activity. It's kind of contrived. I use different numbers sometimes to have more extreme results. But interesting, we're all administrators. We all lead schools in some capacity, but we all have different, or a lot of different answers to one student's grade. Pretty amazing. I've done this with chiefs. I've done this at the Summer Leadership Institute. This is probably the best I've ever seen in terms of a majority with 55%. One of the answers getting 55%. Oftentimes it's kind of evenly split. And a lot of times if I just say like, put your answer in the chat, there'll be all kinds of answers. What do you think, guys? Why are we getting so many answers here? You can just come off mute.
Because of the different ways that you can calculate a category average. Some people may be doing total points, some people may be converting to percents, and then applying the category rate.
Yeah, exactly. That could be one reason. Any other reasons people are getting different answers?
So there's a lot of math involved, and I'm just going to say, when you're talking about rounding errors, you know, you're doing average upon average upon average percentages versus math errors are real.
I appreciate your honesty. I was waiting for somebody to say that. Yeah, just like, it's just not easy always to calculate the average. So there's multiple different problems here. So I always ask this, do our teachers understand this? In Aspen, there are 4 different averaging modes. So 3 of these answers are right. So you could have gotten 77.74% and been correct if you were using categories only, and the student's going to have a C. Or you could use category total points and the student has an A. Or you could use something called total points and the student has an 87.62. This last one, categories and assignments, is a very infrequently used averaging mode. You can research it if you click on this link in our presentation, and you can read about all 4 of the averaging modes with examples from Aspen. It's a CPS document. But again, I asked you, how many of you think your teachers understand this? No. So when a parent comes to you complaining about a grade and you have to figure out how the student got that grade, it's a little embarrassing when you don't even know how to figure it out, how the student got that grade, right? Or maybe you averaged it one way, but then the teacher next door, either at the same grade level or in a different subject, was averaging it differently. So I say all this to say, for me, this is the most important next step that you can take. Again, I'm going to continue to repeat this. ILT first, or grading committee, then your pillars, next averaging mode. So once you get your averaging mode, and this is something like you can do this activity with your staff tomorrow. Tomorrow's a PD day. If you haven't come up with a staff on an averaging mode that everybody's using, use this, highlight why this is important. Most people understand and see why this is important, and come to some kind of an agreement on the, as the school, as to which averaging mode best represents your pillars. Any questions about that? No? So again, a lot of the stuff we're doing today, I hope is useful to you when you're working with your staffs on this stuff. So the next thing to work on, if you've got, well, just can I just see a show of hands? How many of you already at your school have agreed to, or you're all using the same averaging mode with your teachers, and you can check on it and you know that they're all using the same averaging mode? So maybe 3 or 4, maybe. Okay, so if you're not doing that, then that's something, hopefully it's an activity that'll take you 20 minutes tomorrow to do with your staff. Just kind of pull it straight from here. You can use this. Research what the different averaging modes are first using the link so that you have a good understanding of what each of the averaging modes are. The next step after that is agreeing to category assignments and weights. Some of you have already done this. That's great. I think it's fascinating though, if you're not checking on it, whether or not it's actually happening. The University of Chicago Consortium on School Research did a study, I think it was published this school year or last school year. It was very recent. And the authors took data from the 16-17 school year, only 9th grade geometry and algebra teachers across the district. So you would think 9th grade algebra and geometry teachers, those are the ones who probably are going to have the most well-organized grade books. Math teachers, maybe. I provided a link to it in our slide deck so that you can read this report. It's fascinating. And when they were doing the research, they had to figure, they wanted to try to understand different trends in grading and why male and female students were performing differently in math classes as freshmen. And so in order to do that, in order to see grades, it took a lot of time and research, because what they found was there were 709 unique category titles across the 1,804 sections or classrooms in the analysis. 709 different categories. And we're only talking about 9th grade algebra and geometry. It's unbelievable. So if you haven't looked at this at your school, or maybe you've talked about it, but you haven't gone back to check to see if it's happening. And I think one of the things you could talk about with your staff is, if one of our pillars, I'd like to bring it back to the pillars, if one of our pillars is transparency, or one of our pillars is empowering students to take ownership for their grades, or one of our pillars is mathematical accuracy, is it better to have, and you guys look at your categories, is it better to have all these different categories so that students have exams, assessments, evaluations, all meaning the same thing? Or is it better for us to just agree to one title for these categories? Probably 90% or more of your teachers are going to say, yeah, it makes more sense in line with our pillars just to have one name. And so what I would suggest for you to do is go to Aspen. And I've in the slide deck here, if you don't have it, I'll share that with you again shortly, or maybe Bobby, you could put it into the chat for us. There's a link here and it will take you to a page to show you how to download your teacher categories in averaging mode. And you can export that as a CSV file or as a PDF file, and you can see all of the different category names that are being used in your school right now. This is something you could work on tomorrow if you want. If you want to prep tonight, print this out or look at it online, write down all the different category names that everybody's using. And then I suggest doing something like this Jamboard activity I want to take you to now. So let's pretend you do this tonight and you look at all those different category names, you write them down, and this could be a real life Jamboard you have with your teachers where you have a poster paper, you've got these different category names. And we're just gonna do this as a group. If you could just come off mute and let me know as you're looking at this Jamboard, help me group stuff together. What are some families I could create from these different category titles? Could somebody help me and I'll just move it around.
Tests, exams, quizzes.
Tests, exams, quiz. All right, we're going to group these together. Very good. Anything else you see we want to group and make a category to itself?
If you can
And
also add
exit
formative.
ticket. Oh.
Say it again.
If you can move the formative also to the quizzes and the summative to the quizzes.
And maybe exit tickets in that same category.
Okay.
Labs and projects should go in a different category, but probably together.
Okay. Labs and projects. We're starting a second category up here. Go ahead, guys. Keep working with me here.
Evaluations over by the exams.
Put it down here.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is one big category here. All right. Keep going.
Classwork, note work, a notebook, assignments, journals.
All right.
Probably, I would think weekly is potentially like a in-class assignment.
All right. Maybe computer programs too. I don't know. And we've got these two others over here by themselves. Any disagreement? Anybody want to challenge this? I mean, pretend like you're teachers, you're challenging each other. Anything you want to disagree on here?
I would say the exit ticket could be weekly.
What do you think, guys?
I
A
don't-
lot of times, sorry, a lot of times we hear projects are the summative assessment, so that should be in assessments.
Okay, should summative and formative be together?
I think formative and exit tickets should be together.
Up here with these things or somewhere else?
Yeah, there.
Okay,
I think at the end, it doesn't matter.
okay. So you get the point of the activity, guys. It may take your teachers, depending on how you divide them up. You may want to, like, let's say that you write down all these category names and you only want your teachers, like let's say you're a larger school, or I know we have a high school with us, you want your math department or your middle school math team to come to some kind of common understanding of categories so they could do this. Or maybe you do grade bands. Maybe it's K1, 2, or maybe 1, 2, maybe 3, 4, 5, maybe 6, 7, 8, however you divide it up, and have them work through this so they're coming up with some common category names. And can like draw here and say, okay, what are we going to call this, guys? We're going to make one name for this. What do we want to call it?
Assessments.
Okay. I can't write here, so I'm just going to abbreviate. Assessments. But you get the point. I think that you understand that you could do this with a large poster paper or large sheet of paper, sticky notes that represent actually what their current category names are. Maybe you could just have them write down what their current category names are on Post-it notes, put it on the paper, and then start looking at it and come to some kind of common understanding or agreement about what the category names will be. So this is another activity for you to do, to try to come to a standardization of your category names to help make your grading more in line with your pillars. Imagine all of you have some pillars that are going to support doing this activity, standardizing the category names so it's easier for students and parents to understand. So ILT or grading committee, pillars, averaging mode, standardization of category names. That's the next step. How many of you have already done something like this, or you have some standardization of category names at your school? And Matthew, I saw your name go up first. Did you guys have an activity like this, or did you have some other method for coming to an agreement around category names at your school?
I kind of challenged them at the beginning of the year to work in their grade levels to find to have common categories and percentages across grade levels. And then 5th through 8th, where everything is more departmentalized, I had them go vertically in their subject bands and do the same thing.
Was it difficult? What kind of challenges should people who haven't done this anticipate?
Well, obviously with your 5th to 8th grade teams, it's a little harder to find the time for them to get together to be able to work on that. You know, it's not our first go around with talking about grading, but I think it was the first time that I really said, hey, you have to come to some consensus. And so you did have some people who really felt that participation should count very high, very high. And I tried to also challenge them with thinking formative versus summative. And then if that summative should, be the lion's share. And I didn't tell them exactly what, but, I was kind of hoping that they'd get at least above 50% for the summative tasks. And then I think some of them were looking at some certain types of work as maybe summative when it was really formative, or vice versa. And so, it took a few meeting opportunities to kind of bring them around to getting to some consensus. And I wouldn't say everything's perfect yet, but it's a step in the right direction.
I love that example. I've had similar experience. I love a couple of points you made. It wasn't necessarily a one-time go around. There may have been some confusions about certain things, and you still don't think it's necessarily perfect, but it's at least moving in the right direction. And so if you haven't done this yet, I love that example. My experience has been pretty similar as Matthew's. Anybody else have experience doing this that could talk to others who haven't? Jen?
So we started probably about 5 years ago with uniforming our categories and our weights. So one of the first things we did was our network gave us categories and weights to start with. So that, that helped a lot. And then we have started to move away from some of the ones that don't work for us, but we were used to having school-wide standards and weights. So that helped a lot, because our first go around, I think they were like participation, homework, quizzes, exams, and assignments, right? Were our 5 initial categories. So once everybody got used to having that, then we've gotten rid of the homework, we've gotten rid of the participation, and then we combined our assessments into one. We added a project-based learning one, and then we kept our assignments, but we flattened the weights, right? So now your things in your assignment category, in your project category, and in your assessment category weight the same across. So we found that it helped clarify for our students, right? Your classwork is just as important as your summative exams. Your projects you're doing is just as important as those quizzes and tests you take. And by stopping from differentiating quizzes and exams, it lets students have all their summative things count towards their success. We still have unevenness, people are like, well, my quizzes are 10 and my exams are 100. We're working on that. We're not there yet. But, the actual weights in the book are even.
I think it's a great example, because you said it's been a 5-year journey. It's still not necessarily perfect, but it sounds like there's been a lot of great conversations about grades. Yeah. And people are more in line on what other people are doing with their grade books, right? Great examples, guys. Thank you so much for sharing. I appreciate that, Matthew and Jen. I find this is from the Feldman book. It's one of our favorite graphs of all the little charts and graphs that are in the book. Take a moment just to read this one. Even if you've read the book, you might not remember this one, but it kind of highlights why this is important. I find this pretty funny. Can anybody kind of summarize what you're seeing there, or tell us about this chart?
So we're now willing to take ownership over what happens in our classroom, but we're happy to blame the previous.
Yeah, our grading is correct, but everybody else is incorrect. I think that I haven't done this poll with my staff. I'm not sure if I want to, but I wouldn't be surprised if early on, maybe not now, but early on, if it would have been similar to this. And so the reason I put this chart in here is just to kind of, I think this highlights for a number of reasons why it's important that we get as a whole school on the same page, so that at least we know if we're teaching 5th grade, I know what the 4th grade teachers are doing, I know how they're grading, and I know how well they're going to be prepared coming into my class. I can be more confident about that, and everybody can be more confident about everybody else's grading as well. And so the next step, and I know I'm going through a lot of steps here, and as you've heard from Matthew and you've heard from Jen, this takes time. I said this at the beginning of the session today. I said it during our opening session, that it's hard work, it's lengthy work, and it takes time. I tried to make that really clear during our first session, because it's not a quick fix. It's not like looking at standardized test scores where it's really easy to analyze, kind of black and white compared to grading. It takes time, it's a journey. If you're at this stage, this is a great stage to be at. And so I provided a link in the chat. So if you want, you can open it. You'll need to make a copy for yourself in order to edit. I did that so not everybody would be writing on the same thing.
Can you give us access, all of us access?
I think you should have access if you have the link. Let me put the link in the chat.
It says you need access, and I'm signed in on my CPS account.
Ugh. Bobby, can you help us out with that? Or is everybody else having the same problems? You are. I thought I fixed this yesterday. Bobby, are you still with us?
Yes.
Somebody said they had access, but everybody else, some people shook their head. I think it's mixed.
I was able to get in.
Are you able to update the access so that people can access this document? You know what? I think I updated this last night, and I made a copy for myself. This is we fixed it, but then I screwed it up, Bobby. Sorry. Let me. Okay. Hopefully that worked. Try it again, guys, and see if now, oh yeah, I see a lot of you joining it now. Okay. Erica, do you have a CPS account? I know you're with the charter school. Okay.
Yep, I'm in. Thank you.
Okay, great. So this is a large sheet that I have teachers look at every quarter. It is helping teachers plan long-term around assessments. So make a copy for yourself, and teachers can start filling this in as they agree to what their category names are. So we just agreed earlier in that little Jamboard activity that we're going to have a category called assessments, right? I think we said we were going to have another category called maybe projects/labs. We're going to have another category called, I don't know, I think there was a homework. I'm not advocating that you have homework as a category, but I don't know, early on when I was doing this, I didn't want to fight the battle about whether or not I was going to count participation, so I just didn't say anything. And over time, teachers reading this book, thinking more about it, I was revisiting it constantly. Nobody counts participation anymore. It just kind of happened naturally. But at first, I didn't want to get into an argument. I was happy people had at least come to an agreement on names. So maybe that's where you're at. And once you do that, and then the next thing you can do, as Jen had mentioned, is you put the weight. So let's say assessments are going to count 40%. And we're going to have an approximate. Sometimes people say, well, you can't hold me to having so many. It's like an approximate. So let's say we're going to have somewhere between 5 to 7 assessments that quarter. And then the next column over here, you may or may not be able to calculate. That really depends on your averaging mode. If you're using category total points, that's going to be almost, you're not going to be able to fill this out. Although teachers should know how much each assignment is counting towards the overall grade, and you can tell that to students. If you're using categories only, then that's an easier calculation to make. There's 5 per quarter. They're weighted 40% each. So you can calculate how much each of those assessments is going to be worth per quarter. So that I have as the next step is filling out this. You can have teachers doing this as teams tomorrow if you're at that stage, or maybe before our next meeting, sometime during team meetings, or at least getting started on this, so that when eventually we get to reviewing and auditing teachers' grades, we can say, hey, I'm only noticing that there's one assessment in this category that as a team, we all agreed you're going to have between 5 and 7. What's up with that? And you can start having those conversations. Instead of having a conversation like, hey, I'm so angry at you. You only have one assessment counting 40% and half the kids are failing it. Of course, everybody in the classroom is failing. And you know, obviously it makes you really angry when you see that. Don't go there yet. First, have teachers in teams or in your grade bands or your department levels agree to the category name, agree to the category weight, and then agree to an approximate number of assignments per quarter. So that when you have that conversation, you weren't the one who told them how many assignments they need to have. It was a group decision that they made, and you can hold them accountable to the group. Does this make sense? And then, ready for this, maybe you're ready for the next. After that, here at the bottom, I've got, this is first grade quarter 1, first grade quarter 2, first grade quarter 3, first grade quarter 4, second grade quarter 1, goes all the way to, you know, 8th grade quarter 1, 8th grade quarter 2, 8th grade quarter 3, 8th grade quarter 4. So let's go to 8th grade quarter 1. And you'll see at the top, I've got math, reading, science, social science, writing. I forgot to, this is some of my teacher's stuff. If you would like to add more categories in there, or excuse me, more subjects in there, you're welcome to add more subjects. But at first, I want to know, teachers, what assessments will you have during week 1 of the school year? Maybe you're not going to have any for week 1. You're not going to, I'm going to change this to assessments because that's what we all agreed to. And so maybe there's nothing for that week 1. But for week 2, I know according to the curriculum we're using or whatever the long-term unit planning that you're doing, I know we're going to have an assessment on, I don't know, what's scatter plots. There may be something else, you know, for your category 2, if your category 2 was homework, so that you know and the teachers are planning long-term for the whole quarter what their assessments are going to be each week in each category. So again, I know we're all at different stages. If some of you have been doing this for a while, you've got the category names standardized, you've got the weights agreed to, then this might be a next step for you. Okay, we're looking at quarter 2, we're planning for quarter 2. Guys, let's go ahead and write down as a team, what are our assessments? What are our projects, whatever your categories are, what are the assignments going to be in each of our categories for each week of quarter 2? If it's a team that's been together a long time using the same curriculum, they should be able to plan out the whole quarter. If it's a teacher who's their first year, maybe they're the only person teaching that subject, they may need some more help. Maybe they're only able to plan out a week or two. You know your teachers, and you'll have to lay out the expectations. But I would think that a team that's been together for a while, you've given them a curriculum, you've given them professional development, they've got it together, they should be able to lay out the whole quarter for you. And you'll kind of get a sense of how well the team knows what they're doing in terms of long-term planning based on a document like this. Any questions about this? What do you think? Any feedback? You can just unmute. Go ahead.
I see how this this plan also helps with instruction and planning.
Barton, I have a question. So I see the spreadsheets, I see the information. I think it's very valuable. How do you get around like that excessive paperwork complaint that teachers typically have when we have to track things? And I use that very, very loosely because I understand like this is a part of the process, and pretty soon, and I'm sure if this is a legacy document for you, you don't have to use it anymore. But I think like I'm wondering what your advice would be for now for school leaders, because we are kind of coming off of, everything that COVID brought. And so we're trying to get back into instruction. So we're probably doing a lot of deep analysis and tracking of assessments, pre-assessments, post-assessments. Now we're kind of getting into this grading thing. So I'm just wondering like what wisdom or lessons from the field you can learn when it comes to dealing with like tracking things on so many different documents. And the last piece is, if we had to prioritize one thing to track, what would you recommend out of the system that you've just shared?
Sure, that's a really good question. Thanks for asking. I'm an ISP. I've been an ISP for a while, thank goodness. But I have learned from colleagues about the excessive paperwork demands this year. And it is, I don't know what to do. It's pretty frustrating. This for me is not a legacy document. Nicole, I actually have to do this. We do this at the beginning of, right before the next quarter starts. So like I'll have them do this and fill out quarter two on that PD day right before quarter two. I'll have them at the beginning of the year, we fill it out for quarter one. The first sheet, that's the overview that has everything. That part we only do one time a year. We do it at the beginning of the school year. And because we've done it for so long, and I've got all the subjects on here, guys. Because we've done it for so long, it's pretty fast for the team now, but it is something we have to revisit every quarter. I'm not under the same constraints as some of my colleagues, such as yourself, have been in with the excessive paperwork demands. I think that if this is a priority, if it's in your CIWP, then that could be a further case made. I think that also building up those pillars from the outset initially, getting teachers buy-in with, why is this important? Let's look at some of our current practices. Are we all in agreement? Like this is actually helping our students. Some of those paperwork demands people are frustrated by because they seem like they are only serving central office. It's not helping them. So if you can think about why is this helpful for them? Why is this not something that just I as the principal need? But it's actually something that's beneficial for all of them as well. That would be the best wisdom I have, but I'm going to open that up to colleagues if any of you guys have dealt with overcoming the burdensome paperwork stuff right now. No? Anna, were you gonna say something?
Yes, this is a lot of work and a lot of work in progress. We have the same situation over at my school. What we did last year, we started with the book study on grading for equity, and it's taking it slow and having the teachers come around themselves as the need to do some changes, to make some changes, because it's a lot of buy-in, and it's harsh to say, but we have to convince them that this is necessary. So it's just going slow with it, and until putting it out there and having those conversations just ongoing. That's what we've been doing, and moving through this slowly, because there's some habits that are very rooted in the things that they've always done this way, and it's hard for change. It's hard for some of our teachers to bring about change in this. So it's just keeping those conversations going and going.
Barton, could I also add something to that?
Please.
It's, I would agree with Anna that this is a very, very slow process that's necessary. We did the book study with ILT in 2019 before the lockdown, and we're still working our way through it. We spent an entire school year debating the pros and cons of the power of zero. That's how long this process has been. And so we've been going little by little, and I would suggest, like, you see this slide that Barton's sharing right now, even after several years of us addressing this, I don't think my staff is ready for this chart just yet. And so just reading the room, I think, is important, and then just taking small bites, little by little by little, so that we don't overwhelm them and they get completely dismiss the entire process.
If I can add, towards the end of last year, we integrated a growth mindset read, also the growth mindset coach. That too is supporting our work around grading. So it's a lot.
Thank you guys so much for sharing and adding to the conversation. I think we've all mentioned, those of us who've been doing this, it is slow. It does take time. You will get there. I want to show you a slide. So I got to Chavez February 1st, 2010 as principal. And I painstakingly by hand, before I even knew how to use Excel well, went into the old gradebook system and wrote down everybody's grades and all of the information I could collect. It took me forever. This is a snippet of what I found. This was back in maybe October 2010. This is actual real data from our school. Pretty embarrassing. I had one teacher, Mr. X, if I think this is who it is, he's actually a phenomenal teacher, very good, still with us. But the grading was 2 assessments, counting 40%. All the other categories had nothing in them. 2 grades for the quarter. So depending on whose room you were in, you could have very different grades. Anyway, this was 2010. We've been working on it slowly with grading over the last 13 years. There's been starts and stops. But yeah, if you stick with it, you will see results. And I'm trying to share with you everything I've learned over the years so that your progress is a little bit smoother and faster than my progress has been. Any other questions, comments, concerns about today's presentation? Again, just to summarize real quick, grading committee, pillars, in this order: grading committee, pillars, averaging mode, standardizing category names, agreeing to weights, and then starting to nail down the approximate number of assignments per quarter and what those assignments are. So that's what I believe, after having done this with multiple PLCs and myself, all those things need to be done And we haven't even gotten to the grade audit report or to the Feldman, all the ideas in Feldman yet. That's kind of like the baseline stuff to work on. I would recommend doing all of that before getting into things in the Feldman, all the suggestions that Feldman has. Any questions, comments, concerns, feedback?
Barton, I have a quick question about this screen that you're sharing.
Yeah.
Are they the same grade level and same curriculum?
When I got here, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like, for example, are they all third grade teachers using Go Math or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, this was a long time ago. This is back in 2010. So I can't remember what they were using, but yeah, it was same grade level, heterogeneous classes. Yeah. Call to action.
I have a question regarding that little assignment that we did earlier where we tried to calculate the grades.
Yeah.
Out of those different methods of calculating the grade, which one would you say is most equitable from your experience?
So for us, I think categories only is the easiest for students and parents to calculate. And when I've done that little experiment, most people on their own are calculating it using the categories only method. So I think it'd kind of be interesting to see if you do it with your staff. What are people kind of naturally doing on their own before you've even told them anything? That's most of the time what people do. And that's also an easier way so that you can calculate the percent of each assignment before the quarter starts. If you're using the gradebook default, that's categories total points. That's where each assignment, if you make it out of a different number of points, will have a different weight. So if you make something only out of 5 points and you have other assignments that are worth 100 points, that 1 out of 5 points is only going to count a very small amount. It's pretty difficult for a student or a teacher to calculate on their own what the worth of each one of those assignments is. It's almost like there's a double weighting system. You have the weight of the category and you have the weight of the assignment. So that default categories total points, I think, does not align as well with our values as categories only.
And do you remember which of those percentages aligned with categories only?
The lowest with the numbers that we made up for today's example, it was the lowest, but you could contrive it differently to end up with different. There's not like one method that's going to always result in higher scores or a higher percentage.
Okay.
Great question. Anything else? Anything else? Any other feedback? No? Well, we're done a little bit early today.